Have you ever noticed that sometimes the deepest wounds do not come from strangers, but from those we once loved the most? What would make a son, the very child a mother nurtured, turn against her with cruelty and humiliation? The answer lies not on the surface, but deep in the unconscious mind. Stay with me, because what you're about to uncover is something Carl Jung himself recognized, and it reveals one of the darkest truths of human psychology. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to my channel Syc Soul for more deep insights into the human psyche. There are moments when the greatest cruelty does not come from outsiders, but from within families. Why does a son humiliate his mother? This question tears families apart, but it also shines light on hidden forces within the psyche. In this video, we will descend into the depths of psychoanalysis to explore how unconscious conflicts, cultural conditioning, and shadow aspects of personality create this destructive behavior. By the end, you'll not only understand the psychological mechanics, but also gain a clearer view of how complex human bonds really are. Let us begin with Jung's insight. What we fight in others is often what we cannot bear in ourselves. When a grown son humiliates his mother, this is not simply a moment of impatience. It is a systematic pattern rooted in the unconscious. This cruelty does not come from cold indifference, but from excessive emotional entanglement feelings that never found a healthy resolution. For Jung, the mother in a son's psyche is not just a person, but an archetype. She represents the primal source, security, care, but also dependence. When a son attacks his mother, he is battling not only her, but also the memories of his earliest experiences: helplessness, neediness, vulnerability. Humiliation becomes the twisted language of emotions that had no outlet. Imagine a child who never learned to name his complex feelings. As an adult, he expresses those feelings through destruction. Overwhelming love mutates into rage. Heavy gratitude transforms into hatred. Longing for closeness turns into brutal distancing. This dynamic becomes most visible when the mother shows weakness, when she ages, falls ill, or needs help. The child who once depended on her suddenly holds the power. But instead of compassion, he unleashes unconscious revenge for years of dependence. But here is the unsettling truth: every attack on the mother is also an attack on himself. What the son believes frees him, traps him even deeper. And this cycle, as Freud explained, is powered by repression. Let us look more closely. When a son humiliates his mother, he often speaks the language of projection. He projects his own weaknesses, fears, and unfulfilled desires onto her. The mother becomes the scapegoat for all his shortcomings. She is accused of being too clingy, while in truth he has never learned to set healthy boundaries. She is portrayed as manipulative, while he cannot openly express his own emotional needs. These projections grow so intense that he no longer sees his mother's reality. Instead, he sees only a distorted image, a reflection of his own inner conflicts. The real woman disappears behind the shadow of his battles. And here Jung's concept of the shadow becomes crucial. The shadow contains everything we reject in ourselves. So when a son systematically humiliates his mother, he is not only punishing her, he is rejecting parts of himself that he cannot accept. Her emotionality is attacked because he fears his own feelings. Her care is mocked because he cannot admit his need for connection. The tragedy is that these battles maintain a connection that should have long been transformed into maturity. The son who humiliates his mother is paradoxically still entangled with her. He fights her so fiercely because he has never truly separated on an emotional level. Aggression becomes a twisted form of attachment. Here another hidden layer is revealed: the fear of individuation. Jung described individuation as the process through which a person becomes their true self. This requires separating from the parents in a way that honors both sides. But the son who humiliates his mother has never completed this process. He remains trapped in rebellion that belongs to adolescence, not adulthood. This is not the healthy rebellion of a teenager testing boundaries. Instead, it is the bitter rebellion of an adult who never learned to develop autonomy in a mature way. His humiliations become a ritual constant proof that he is free. Yet in truth, he is not free at all. He is chained to his unconscious patterns. And here lies the heartbreaking irony. The son who humiliates his mother believes he is showing strength, but in reality, he is proving his deepest weakness. But what about the mother herself? Does she also play a role in this destructive cycle? In this painful dynamic, the mother herself becomes a tragic figure. She may have dedicated her entire life to caring for her son, only to see her devotion repaid with contempt. But here's the hard truth: she too is not free from unconscious contributions to this pattern. Sometimes she struggles to let her son go. Sometimes she clings to the role of the mother because her own identity has been defined entirely through it. Carl Jung reminded us that in every destructive relationship, both sides unconsciously help maintain the cycle. The mother who continually allows humiliation may be sending signals that reinforce her son's behavior. She accepts the role of the victim because she believes it is the only way to preserve connection. Yet this acceptance is itself a symptom of unresolved psychological conflict. A mother who tolerates repeated humiliation may never have learned to recognize her worth independently of motherhood. She sacrifices dignity because she believes love always requires sacrifice. She confuses devotion with self-abandonment. But this kind of sacrifice does not heal her son. It deepens his contempt because it shows him he has power over her. The bitter reality is that a person who does not respect themselves will rarely be respected by others. The mother who sets no boundaries raises a son who abuses this lack of boundaries. And so, the complexity of the human psyche reveals itself in all its tragedy. Both mother and son remain trapped in patterns neither of them can see clearly. The son fights against an image of his mother that in truth doesn't fully exist. And the mother continues to love a son who interprets her love as weakness, punishing her for it. Even worse, these cycles are rarely born in isolation. They are often passed down through generations. A son who humiliates his mother may have already seen his father treat her the same way. Without realizing it, he repeats what he witnessed in childhood. At the same time, a mother who allows humiliation may have grown up in an environment where self-respect was never nurtured. She passes on to her son the very patterns she herself never overcame: the inability to respect and protect oneself. And here's the chilling part: the cycle does not end by itself. It repeats generation after generation unless both sides find the courage to face their unconscious shadows. But what exactly keeps this destructive cycle alive? Another hidden factor in this destructive cycle is what psychologists call the narcissistic wound. As the son grows older and confronts his own shortcomings, the mother becomes a dangerous witness. Why? Because she has seen him at his weakest. She knows the child he once was: his fears, his tears, his dependence. For a man desperate to maintain an image of strength, this becomes unbearable. The mother is no longer seen as a loving protector, but as a threat to his fragile self-image. Her very existence reminds him that he was once small, helpless, and needy. Jung would call this a conflict between persona and shadow. The persona is the mask we present to the world: confident, independent, strong. The shadow, by contrast, contains everything we reject in ourselves: our fear, our weakness, our vulnerability. The mother becomes a living symbol of the shadow because she embodies the memory of his dependent side. But this dynamic is not only personal, it is also shaped by culture. In many societies, men are expected to be independent, emotionally closed, and strong at all costs. A man who openly admits his love for his mother is often mocked as unmanly. These cultural expectations force many sons to deny their natural emotional bonds. Humiliating the mother and becomes a distorted form of self-assertion. The son believes he proves his masculinity by devaluing feminine care. He confuses cruelty with strength, indifference with autonomy. This confusion becomes painfully clear when the mother grows old, becomes ill, or needs support. Instead of offering care, many sons respond with rejection, even contempt. Why? Because her weakness reminds them of their own mortality. Her aging mirrors their fear of aging. Her dependence mirrors their dread of dependence. Freud noted that we often hate most what we fear most. The son who humiliates his aging mother is often fighting his own fear of aging, illness, and death. The mother becomes a scapegoat for existential fears he cannot face within himself. And here lies the tragedy. She is punished not for her failures, but for being human, for being vulnerable, for reminding him of his own fragile condition. But this strategy never brings liberation. It only deepens the inner split. And the real tragedy is this: humiliation often escalates precisely when the mother most needs love. The son's cruelty robs him of the very chance to develop genuine maturity and compassion. At this stage, the cycle of humiliation often becomes more than a family issue. It becomes a deep psychological prison. The son thinks he is gaining control, but in reality, he is losing control over himself. Every act of cruelty strengthens the chains of his unconscious. Jung explained that what we do not make conscious will come back to us as fate. The son who humiliates his mother unconsciously prepares his own destiny. One day, he may face the same treatment from his own children. His unresolved shadow becomes their inheritance. This is the law of the psyche. What is not healed is repeated. Again and again. Freud observed the same phenomenon and called it the compulsion to repeat. Human beings, he said, are mysteriously drawn to reenact old traumas instead of resolving them. And so, a son who humiliates his mother is very often reenacting an old story from his own past. Perhaps he himself felt humiliated by his parents. Perhaps he felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy. Unable to express that pain directly, he displaces it onto the one figure who feels both safe and vulnerable, the mother. She becomes the container of his unspoken rage. But repression has a price. When emotions are not expressed in healthy ways, they return in destructive ones. The son represses his helplessness, but it resurfaces as cruelty. He represses his longing for closeness, but it returns as mockery and distance. This is why the humiliating son often feels empty even after asserting power. He believes that by tearing his mother down, he proves his strength, but inside, he feels weaker than before. The unconscious cannot be cheated. It knows the truth. The tragedy is doubled when society silently permits this cycle. Many cultures normalize disrespect toward mothers, interpreting it as independence or even strength. Instead of breaking the chain, society reinforces it. And so humiliation is repeated, not just privately, but collectively. Yet even here, there is a possibility for change. The very intensity of the conflict reveals how deep the bond still is. The son humiliates his mother not because he is free of her, but because he is still deeply tied to her emotionally. And this is where the paradox lies. Humiliation looks like separation, but it is actually dependence in disguise. The son cannot let go, so he attacks. But what would it take to truly break free from this destructive prison? To break free from this destructive prison, one must first confront the unconscious forces driving it. Jung believed that true liberation begins with individuation, the process of integrating the shadow and becoming whole. For the son, this means facing the parts of himself he has always rejected: his vulnerability, his dependence, his fear. Instead of projecting these qualities onto his mother, he must acknowledge them within himself. Only then can he relate to her not as an enemy, but as a fellow human being. This is the painful but necessary work of psychological growth. Freud, too, saw a path forward. He argued that repression can only be overcome by bringing the repressed material into awareness. That means confronting uncomfortable memories, moments of helplessness, hidden anger, or unmet needs, and naming them openly. What was once unspoken must be spoken, or it will continue to speak through destructive behavior. But the son is not the only one who must change. The mother also has her work to do. She must learn to set boundaries, to recognize her own worth, and to step out of the role of silent victim. Her task is to show that love is not the same as self-sacrifice. By respecting herself, she teaches her son, perhaps for the first time, that true love requires dignity. This process is not easy. It often requires therapy, honest dialogue, and sometimes painful distance. But without it, the cycle will continue, poisoning not only the relationship between mother and son, but also future generations. On a deeper level, this work is not just about two individuals. It is about healing the relationship between the masculine and feminine within the psyche itself. The son's attack on the mother is, in symbolic terms, an attack on the feminine principal: care, emotion, vulnerability. To humiliate the mother is to humiliate the inner feminine. And when the inner feminine is rejected, a man becomes split, restless, and incomplete. He cannot truly love because he fears dependence. He cannot truly lead because he fears compassion. He cannot truly live because he is at war with half of his own soul. And this is the ultimate irony. The son who humiliates his mother believes he is proving his strength, but in truth, he is proving his deepest weakness. Yet there is still hope, because awareness can transform even the darkest patterns. But how can this awareness be shared with others? And why does this message matter for us all? The story of a son humiliating his mother is not only a personal tragedy, it is a mirror held up to humanity. It shows us what happens when unconscious wounds remain unhealed, when shadows are denied, and when love is twisted into resentment. At its heart, this pattern reveals a universal truth. Relationships are never only about the other person. They are also about how we see ourselves reflected in the other. A son sees in his mother both his strength and his weakness, his growth and his dependence, his love and his fear. When he cannot accept these contradictions inside himself, he attacks the one who represents them most clearly. But there is a different path. The son who dares to face his shadow, to accept his vulnerability, and to integrate his hidden emotions discovers something extraordinary. The humiliation ends and respect begins. The mother, too, when she dares to honor her dignity, breaks the chains of silent victimhood and becomes a figure of strength rather than a container of pain. Together, they can begin to heal, not by erasing the past, but by transforming it. The son no longer sees his mother as the enemy of his freedom, but as a human being with her own story. And the mother no longer sees herself as powerless, but as a woman whose worth is not defined by sacrifice. This transformation is not only for them, it is for all of us, because the way we treat our mothers reflects the way we treat the feminine within ourselves and in society. To respect the mother is to respect life itself. To humiliate her is to humiliate the very ground on which we stand. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." By facing these shadows, both the sons and the mothers, we lighten that burden. We allow a new generation to live more freely, more consciously, more whole. And so the lesson is clear. Humiliation is not strength, it is weakness disguised. True strength is compassion, true freedom is respect, and true maturity is love without fear. The question that remains is this: will we continue repeating the unconscious cycle, or will we find the courage to break it? The answer lies within each of us. If this touched your heart and opened your mind, share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to Syc Soul for more deep explorations of the human psyche.